June 1993. In the early periods of the hot summer season, a foul smell began spreading throughout the small rural area of Knox County, Kentucky. Its inhabitants, though initially unconcerned, weren't certain how to define and label this uncharacteristic smell. With no official statement from any public figures, the citizens were left speculating whether it was a gas leak, a natural disaster, or rather something completely different. Yet none the wiser to the smell's actual origin. Its cause would remain unknown, but its consequences would soon reveal itself. A few weeks later, on the 1st of July, the company Knox Telecommunications would take down the phone lines of the entire county for maintenance, to the great dismay of the inhabitants. Whether this was deliberate or a coincidence is still uncertain. Nevertheless, 5 days later, in the early morning of July the 6th, military checkpoints appeared around the towns of Muldrow, West Point, Brandenburg, Louisville, as well as the military installation of Fort Knox, along with the implementation of roadblocks intended to restrict vehicular movement. Tall fences were also erected around the perimeters. Military air traffic would suddenly increase, and when people tried to go about their daily lives and use the highways, they were all of a sudden met by concrete barriers and heavily armed infantry in hazmat suits who turned them away at gunpoint, making sure that no one got in or out. This blockade would come to be known as the Knox Exclusion Zone. Contained within their towns and cities, and unable to contact the outside world, the inhabitants of Knox County could do nothing but wait in uncertainty, as their reason for this confinement and isolation still remained unknown to them. Rumors of a horrible and rampant illness began spreading among the trapped population, and while the immediate image portrayed to the public was that of a situation under control, nothing but a mild outbreak of a disease that was being contained, the situation within the exclusion zone itself would prove to be vastly different. On the 7th of July, the President of the United States abruptly returned from the G7 summit in Tokyo. His early return, however, was announced to be unrelated to the incident in Knox County. This despite the fact that the news network NNR Radio on several occasions reported the President meeting with the Center for Disease Control to discuss the situation. As public pressure mounted for officials to provide any answers, Kentucky Governor Cal Fairweather claimed that he, just like everyone else, was in the dark regarding the incident within the exclusion zone. With lack of clarity from any public office, rumors were running rampant, and the rest of the country impatiently awaited a statement from any authority figure, hoping that someone could provide clarity on the evolving issue. However, when a White House representative in a brief statement explained that the military maneuvers were all part of a long-term strategic plan to deal with security events and a localized contamination, the Republican Party in Congress heavily criticized the president for his lack of statement on the issue. On top of that, on the 8th of July, a no-fly zone was established over Knox County, which obviously drew a lot of attention from the media.
This is Jaye from LBMW reporting live from the Exclusion Zone south of Louisville in Knox County, Kentucky, where a massive area has been quarantined off due to what officials call an outbreak of an unknown disease. The military presence is immense, with infantry wearing full protective suits, allowing neither people to enter nor exit. We have little information about what exactly is happening within the zone. However, earlier today, we talked to a young woman by the name of Denise, who confirms that she had been quarantined by the military and thoroughly tested and examined by their scientists the morning of the 6th of July in the moment the zone was established. We're currently awaiting a statement from the military commander in charge of the exclusion zone.
On the 9th of July at 11 a.m., General John McGrew, the commander of the exclusion zone, addressed the public in a nationwide broadcast. General McGrew confirmed the presence of a sickness within Knox County. a sickness with flu-like symptoms that led to people losing control of their motor functions before falling unconscious. He alleged that people infected with the disease would later regain control of their bodies, but would suffer from both panic, nausea, and confusion during the duration of sickness. Though they weren't sure how the disease was spreading, the general assured that despite what rumors might suggest, there had been no fatalities among the affected within the zone. However, only 6 hours after the general's statement, the sound of gunshots echoed out from within the exclusion zone, close to the established border perimeter. The already skeptical public opinion was declining, and the president's vague assurance in his following statement, where he underlined that he had complete confidence in the military containing the situation, did little to calm the nerves of the wary population. As news organizations had started to gather around the exclusion zone's perimeter, the stories of people being displaced, quarantined, on top of use of physical violence, in hand with how the infected of the disease were allegedly going mad, slowly started to build negative momentum within the public's perception. In an interview the very same day, on the radio station NNR at around 2 p.m., Dr. Jeff Galbraith, the former chief scientist of the CDC, would, with his criticism of the administration, further ignite the distrust in the government's handling of the incident, underlining that the country wasn't prepared nor equipped to handle an epidemic due to budget cuts. He stressed that you don't solve diseases with military and weapons, and as his closing remark, emphasized that the situation was most likely much worse than reported, and what we were being told was only the tip of the iceberg. In response to Dr. Galbraith's interview on NNR, the CDC would criticize his claims, saying that the doctor was simply trying to score cheap points due to his dismissal following the Riley outbreak. The CDC would, however, retract this statement within the following 2 hours. It didn't take long before the chain reaction of lack of transparency from the government, in combination with the rampant rumors, the interview with Dr. Galbraith, as well as a clumsy and lackluster attempt from a military scientist at clarifying the situation, resulted in countrywide protests, which, along with the condemnation from foreign politicians, such as the UK Prime Minister, fueled an already unstable situation. Amidst the chaos of people demanding answers, panic buying erupted. Hundreds of thousands of terrified people flocked to the stores at the same time, everyone hoping to secure precious resources for themselves in case the situation was to turn any worse. And as protests against the lack of transparency regarding the exclusion zone continued to emerge around the country, a large gathering of people decided to march on the White House in protest on the 10th of July. Though the intention with the march had been to demand answers from the president, the event was preemptively cancelled as the police intervened with blockades and mass arrests. The reception of people's freedom of speech being oppressed was not taken lightly by the general public, and as the president took to addressing the nation in the early morning of the 11th of July, he once again failed to assure the nation that this outbreak was indeed nothing to worry about, and finally, tempers reached a boiling point. Though the president stated that he would speak on the matter when he had the full picture, the protests throughout the country finally turned violent. Riots erupted in Washington, New York, and Los Angeles, and with the situation deteriorating by the minute, the European community advised its members to close both internal and external borders. On top of that, the World Health Organization advised that all non-military and medical flights be grounded worldwide from 6 p.m. that very same day, sending the stock markets plummeting. A decision that the President of the United States condemned as economically unsound, as he once again maintained that the Knox incident had already been solved and dealt with. Following the President's statement, a bunch of pictures were released by official sources showing crowded streets within the exclusion zone, suggesting that people were still living normal lives. However, as reports of the exclusion zone's boundaries being expanded and more families being forced out of their homes, On top of Jaye from LBMW reporting gunshots within the zone throughout the day, the validity of the picture's authenticity was brought into question. The riots further escalated within several major cities across America, with at least one being killed in New York and many injured in Miami. Anticipating the worst kind of response from the public, the president announced on the 12th of July that a curfew would be active at 6 p.m. that very same day, and to counter potential civil unrest, military installations would be set up across the country. However, while the public's perception of the incident within the exclusion zone had been foggy at best, having spent the last 6 days in uncertainty, the horrible truth behind the rampant disease in Knox County would suddenly make a grueling appearance. At 7 p.m., 1 hour after the curfew was instated nationwide, a picture taken from within the exclusion zone somehow made it past the military blockades and was circulated through mainstream media. The picture showed a young man walking unconcerned down a street littered with corpses, his left arm dismembered at the elbow, and his entire body covered in deep bite marks. Whatever was happening within the exclusion zone wasn't simply the outbreak of a disease causing confusion, it was something far more severe, something out of a nightmare. The public now understood the severity, yet not the issue. That was, until that very same evening, when an amateur radio broadcast from within the exclusion zone would cause full-blown panic across the country.
Hello? I'm in the exclusion zone. You're being lied to. The army knows exactly what this is. It's a disease that... people aren't people anymore. At first it came from a fever. Anyone could get it. People died real quick and then it happened. Now they get their teeth into you, you're one of them. And we can't get out. They've got snipers. They don't ask questions. But making that kind of noise. That's what attracts the dead. There are so many here. And so quickly. Too quickly.
The truth was finally out, and on the 13th of July, as the unsettling gravity of the situation spread throughout the country, numerous survivors from within the exclusion zone were released from military captivity. Unfortunately, their testimonies would provide no relief to the rest of the public, as their accounts told grueling stories of the infected hunting the living, spreading this disease through bites and physical contact.
My father was bitten. The wound, it festered. He got sick from it almost immediately. The infection ate right through him. We were on the move for about a day, then he got too weak to walk. We held out at the pharmacy. I tried to give him antibiotics, but it just kept getting worse. He got delirious, sweating through his clothes. The fever killed him. Then he...
That's enough. Turn it off, Frank.
It was quickly determined that the infection was spread through fluids, mainly blood and saliva. Therefore, any physical contact with an infected person could potentially be deadly. And though rumors suggested that small scratches or bruises could be treated with proper medical care, a single bite from anyone carrying the virus was a guaranteed death sentence. The initial infection would mimic that of the regular flu. Nausea, fever, and joint pain would take hold of the victim. However, anxiety would then set in. The infected would be plunged into a downward spiral of up to 3 days of ever-increasing agony, finally culminating in severe confusion, crippling fatigue, and terminal hyperthermia. Ultimately, the victim would die from the fever. Then, Within an hour of the victim's demise, the body would rise from the dead. At 12:15 p.m. on the 13th of July, a joint statement for the UN from 38 nations announced the complete lack of clarity from American authorities regarding the incident in Knox County. This was followed by preemptive measures being taken against the disease on a global scale, leading to major evacuations and curfews in both Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Once again, General McGrew gave a statement to the press, assuring the public once again that there was no need for further panic, that the infected were not deceased, and that the search for a cure was ongoing. However, despite the general statement, martial law would be instated throughout the entirety of the United States that very same evening. At the same time, in Knox County, a large group of survivors from within the exclusion zone were permitted to enter the main camp just south of Louisville, though the reasons for this permit is still unknown. The following day, early in the morning of the 14th of July, the president would leave the White House, passing through endless crowds of angry citizens. Simultaneously, within the primary exclusion zone south of Louisville, protests among the confined civilians broke out. This situation escalated to a point where the angry protesters ended up clashing with military personnel. During the conflict, 2 unarmed people were shot and killed by the guards. This led to the mob becoming extremely aggressive, which forced the military to disperse them with warning shots and tear gas. Unfortunately, while the gunshots managed to disperse the protesters, they had also attracted the attention of every infected within the exclusion zone. Hundreds, if not thousands, of infected began piling up at the perimeter of the main camp, overwhelming the guard as they broke through the defenses. Seeing the camp as a lost cause, the military decided to pull out, leaving hundreds and hundreds of survivors behind, which most, if not all, were killed in the process. Under orders of General McGrew, the military would blow up key bridges and river crossings in an attempt to contain the outbreak. Unfortunately, it would prove to be a futile effort. For while the initial outbreak of the infection had only been shown to spread through fluids, meaning direct contact with the infected, something had changed over the last couple of days. It might have been a mutation within the disease, or it might have had something to do with the pileup of dead bodies within the exclusion zone. Whatever it was, the second wave of the infection had become airborne, and while a small minority of people were shown to be immune to this new strain of the virus, the majority of the population was not. Suddenly, people outside of the exclusion zone began showing symptoms, and from there, the situation spiraled out of control. General McGrew officially ordered the US military to take control of the situation. However, at this point, it was far too late. By the 18th of July, despite the lockdown order of American flights by the WHO, the infection had reached pandemic proportions, being confirmed in both Berlin, London, Seoul, Tokyo, and Mogadishu. Hey there, Hazmat here. That concludes the story of the event in Knox County and Project Zomboid. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and tell me in the comments below what game you would like to see covered next. As always, a big thanks goes out to the Hunters Lounge, specifically the exclusive Gitchy Boy and the exclusive Johnny Sevens. The VIPs, Corvo Bearslayer, Derivative, Doc Powell, Gino Lucero, Goose, Hambone, Jiminal Bob, Corey Peterson, Mort Dev Menace, Ryan, Slip, Stas Biestek, Sunrise Phoenix, TJ Crane, Texas Toast, and the Wizard of Copper. And of course, all the regulars. If you want to support me directly as a content creator, consider signing up as a member of the Hunters Lounge either on Patreon or here on YouTube. Link is in the description below. A big thanks goes out to both Jack and Nebula for their voice acting as well. You can find the link to both of their social media profiles in the description as well. I would also like to give a big shout out to Pugh, who's the creator of the AI synchronized footage covering the event of Project Zomboid that I used occasionally throughout this video. I highly recommend you go check out the original that he created. It is absolutely phenomenal. That link is also posted in the description below. And with that said, thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.